John Helliwell is a hugely distinguished economist who has advised national and international bodies, edited scholarly journals, and served as visiting professor at some of the world's most prestigious universities. But right now, he's the lead author of the UN's World Happiness Report, which ranks the happiness of the world's nations as measured by careful surveys of their populations. Happiness, it turns out, is very highly correlated with positive social relationships, with trust, generosity, support in times of trouble. And since people really are happier working together for a worthy purpose, he says, we can see a powerful new path to sustainability. Because really, what more worthy and satisfying purpose could there be than taking care of our planet together?
Get some evidence from people about what does make for a good life. And you don't do that directly by asking them what's a good life for you, although that is an option. But the way that we do it is simply ask them to rate their lives as a whole. That's the question as Aristotle asked us to ask it. He said, if you really want to know what a good life is, you ask people about their life as a whole. And then Aristotle listed a whole range of characteristics of life that he thought would lead people to evaluate their lives highly. And at one point after that, he said, this is just theory unless it actually matches what goes on in the world. So having read this in Aristotle's work, I said, we now have data that allow us to test Aristotle's propositions. So I became, for a year or so, Aristotle's research assistant. It's a good person to work for. He doesn't demand anything. The salary isn't high, but that's the whole point. Once you take this evidence seriously, then of course pay isn't what it's about. It's about how engaging and important the work is. So life, by counting what counts, by collecting this evidence from people about the quality of life, and then finding out quite a lot more about their lives, you can then use it to explain what is there about their lives that gives them that happy feeling or a happy evaluation. They are generating the empirical evidence. You see, every one of these responses is one observation now among the millions we have from around the world. And so we can assess life in sub-communities in Cape Breton and in all the nations of the world. So where we find a lot of commonality. And I think Aristotle probably thought he was talking for more than free people in Greece at the time. It turns out it applies equally to the people he wasn't thinking about, which are women and slaves. They apply right across the board. I'll give you the 6 that we now use, and they all 5 of them have direct counterparts with what Aristotle said. Sufficiency of resources was one, and we use that at a national level as GDP per capita. At the individual level, it would be their household income. Next one was healthy life expectancy, good health, which we measure by healthy life expectancy at the international level, and within the country we use people's own assessments of the quality of their health, which match very closely to the other measures. Then something he regarded as important, a sense of freedom to make your key life decisions. Perhaps most importantly, do you have someone to count on in times of trouble? And then 2 more. One, a sense of trust, which is much more important than our data and modeling from the Gallup World Poll permits us to say, because the number of trust-based questions there is quite limited. In fact, they refer to the absence of corruption in business and government. Trust, as you know, is much more than that. It's someone who would return your wallet if you dropped it, or would love to help you under any kind of circumstance. That's the real trust to rely on. That's important. And finally, and this wasn't in Aristotle's list, although I'll bet he would say, of course, is generosity. Because we find that very important empirically, but not in what people think, not in what government policies assume, certainly not in what businesses assume when they design their pay structures and their job characteristics. People really do like to do things with others and for others. And so they work much better in flat administrative structures, in places where people work together rather than dog eat dog, where they're not competing to be in the top 10% of a grade distribution. They're learning together with the people they're with. All kinds of ways that involve pro-sociality, even in the extreme, and this has got a lot of experimental evidence behind it now. You give people a certain amount of resources, and you ask some of them to give it away, and you ask others to use it for themselves. The ones who give it away are happier than the ones that used it on themselves.
John Helliwell, whose thought and conversation makes me happy. At the Green Interview, we're developing a whole project on how to measure the things that really matter, a form of economics that goes far beyond traditional measurements of the economy. If you enjoyed this interview, you might want to look at our interviews with Jigme Thinley, the former Prime Minister of Bhutan, whose government pursued gross national happiness rather than gross national product, and with Dr. Ron Coleman, who developed ways of measuring gross national happiness. I'm happy to suggest that you also check out our interview with Dr. Catherine O'Brien, who created the concept of sustainable happiness and who teaches it both online and in person. For the Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron, and I'm happy that you were able to join us.